And I think that I talked to a lot of people, particularly in hospitality, and particularly at the beginning of the first few months of this year. First quarter has been great. They're doing really well going forward. So we want to keep up that momentum. We're here today to sign the budget for the state of Florida into law, and I want to thank Senator Leak. I want to thank Representative Leak, Representative Webster Barnaby, and I also want to thank Senator Tom Wright for working hard on what was supposed to be a really, really big disaster for Florida in terms of the fiscal impact. When you started to see the fallout from COVID last spring, the forecast for Florida and really everywhere in the country, but particularly a service and tourism-based economy like we have in Florida, those predictions were dire. Well, I'm happy to report today that once I sign this budget, we will be signing a budget that responsibly supports our men and women in law enforcement, our K through 12 education students and teachers, conserves and protects our great environmental and natural resources throughout the state of Florida, but does so in a way that has the lowest per capita tax burden of any state in the country, and that has what will probably be $10 billion in reserve, which will be about 10% of the overall budget. And so you would have said that a year ago, no one would have believed that would have been possible, and yet here we are. And part of the reason we were here is because we've had good stewards in the legislature who spend conservatively and responsibly, but also the fact that Florida has schools open, businesses open, and people having a right to work. That has made all the difference. And the fact that we were the first state in the country to put seniors first for vaccination. And so what happened was, different seniors approach it different ways. But I can tell you, there were definitely some seniors that once they were vaccinated, they wanted to rush to restaurants. They wanted to be out and doing a lot of stuff. And so that's helped that fuel as well. And so we are right now, the budget will show about $9.5 billion in reserves, but that does not account the additional money that we'll likely get in June. So remember, they did the most recent estimate in April. We got almost $800 million over estimate in April. It looks like for May, we're going to be $500 million over estimate in terms of revenue coming in. We anticipate something similar for June. So if you get another $500 million, that's going to mean we have $10 billion in reserve in the state of Florida. The federal funds that haven't been spent is not counted in that. So you still have that there that they're going to be able to apply to infrastructure, whatever they want to do next session. This is purely just the state funds. And if you go back to last April, the shortfalls that everyone was predicting, look, we were obviously concerned about it. But as we got into the summer, we were open. I mean, I remember everyone, a lot of people were trying to tell me to close restaurants like this last summer. We didn't do it. We kept business open. We got kids in school. We did all those things. And the result was our economy really started to rebound. And then because you had a lot of these other states that just kept locking people down, we were the state lifting people up. That was good for Floridians, but we were also the landing spot for a lot of people that wanted to escape the insanity and come and get their mental, get recharged from escaping these lockdowns. And so we served as kind of the de facto West Berlin through a lot of the balance of this for the United States. And I think it's benefited a lot of people throughout the country, but obviously it's benefited us. And then we not led the way we led, you would not have seen a lot of these other states coming and following Florida's lead as well. You look at Canada, you look at some of these countries in Europe, they're still chafing under lockdowns. They write into my office, the Canadians who have places here, and they say how much better it is in Florida than being chafing under these lockdowns. And so, we did it, and now we're in a situation where we're going to have a lot of opportunities for Floridians that have been preserved with this. I think that there's some really good stuff to point out. I mentioned our tax burden is currently the lowest amongst all states in the country on a per capita basis. Our spending per capita is also one of the lowest amongst the populous states that have big. And a state like New York, they have millions of people fewer than Florida, and their budget's more than twice the size of our budget in Florida, and yet we're delivering services better. Our infrastructure is much better. Our K-12 system performs better, and we have the #1 rated public university system in the United States, according to U.S. News and World Report. So we are responsible in how we're doing it. We obviously believe having a healthy economy undergirding it really makes an impact. But if you look at what we've been able to do, our budget here supports K-12 education more than the state has ever done. A lot of people were predicting steep cuts to K-12. That did not happen. We had the underlying strength in our economy, and being open made a big difference. We also were able to, last year we did the largest teacher compensation in a generation in Florida. A lot of people thought I should have vetoed that given COVID. I said, no, we're going to do it. We're going to make it work. So we got that again this year, and the legislature even increased that. So our goal is to have the average minimum salary throughout the state of Florida be $47,500. That'll make us, one of the top handful of states in the country. We were the bottom half of states. Now we're getting closer to being one of the better states. And it's an interesting fact. I think it's something like only 12% of school districts across America have an average minimum of even $40,000. And Florida, we have, and Corcoran can correct me, but I think it's 90% of our school districts are already over that there. So that's a big difference in terms of trying to get people who are talented to go in to the profession. And because we worked hard to have schools open, when a lot of these other places were keeping them closed, and even to this day, you have places throughout the United States where parents don't have meaningful access to in-person education. And how that could be the case is a disgrace. It's appalling. It is not based on any science or data whatsoever. This was all clear a year ago. Last June, we knew the kids needed to go back in school. How do we know? Because in every place around the world where they were back in school, it was safe. It was a low-risk environment, and obviously it was something that was very important to be doing for the kids. So we did it. And, we had the superintendents. They wanted to go back by and large. And most of the teachers wanted to go back. Now, the union sued us to close the schools, and we won that lawsuit. But I don't think that was representative of most of the teachers and principals. I think most of them understood how important it was, understood how important it is for the kids, and understood how important it was for the parents to be able to do this. And so because of that, I asked the legislature to do $1,000 bonuses for all principals and teachers, both for school districts and for public charter schools. And so this budget delivers on that. We will sign that in the law right now in just a few minutes. We also understand, and this is prior to COVID, but COVID exacerbated this, that we've got a lot of folks who are struggling with mental health concerns. My wife, the First Lady, has done a lot to bring awareness and for advocating for folks, particularly school-age children who may be struggling along these lines, and try to make sure that the money that's out there is actually going to the right places. So in this budget, we have $120 million for in-school mental health initiatives, so that's a $20 million increase over last year. We also have $5.5 million specifically for youth mental health awareness and assistance training to continue our work to address mental health in Florida schools. First Lady's been instrumental in that as well. But we understand that the schools are one part. It's obviously bigger than just that. So we have $137.6 million in funding dedicated to community-based services for adults and children with mental wellness needs. Altogether, if you look across every agency, the budget that we'll sign today dedicates over $2.5 billion to mental health and substance abuse prevention, and takes important steps in addressing the very real and very personal needs of Floridians. I can tell you this, whatever mental health issues developed in Florida as a result of COVID, they would be exponentially worse had we been locked down for a year. They'd be exponentially worse. if people had lost their jobs for a year, if people were kids were locked out of school for a year, and if all these businesses went out of business. And so we've got work to do in that regard. But quite frankly, the best mental health initiative we did was just have the state open and let people live normal lives. Because when you try to isolate people for months on end, that is not natural. It's not normal, and it exacerbates a lot of problems that are pre-existing in society. So this is one of the best budgets the state's ever done for mental health and mental well-being. It's also one of the best budgets we've ever done for protecting Florida's water resources and natural environment. This is a central issue for our state. It was one of the major issues that I promised I would tackle when I became governor. We said we were going to go and do $2.5 billion in Everglades restoration and water quality over 4 years. And that was $1 billion more than had been done over the previous 4. Today, we're ahead of schedule on that. We're going to have well over $625 million for Everglades restoration and the protection of water resources. And so this is really significant, especially when you think about where people were assuming we would been a year ago. A lot of people thought that we would lose our momentum with all that we've been able to achieve for Florida's environment. And in fact, they actually did more than I even asked for in my budget on this. And so I think it's impressive to see how everybody's come together in Tallahassee to support our important natural resources. We also have other things just beyond some of the infrastructure projects. There's $302 million for targeted water quality improvements to achieve meaningful and measurable nutrient reductions in water bodies across the state, as well as to further implement the recommendations of our Blue-Green Algae Task Force. We also have a landmark program about promoting coastal resiliency, promoting resiliency against flooding and other environmental hazards that a flood-prone and storm-prone state like Florida has to deal with. And so we established the Resilient Florida program at my request. I signed that into law a couple weeks ago. That program has initial seed money of $500 million that will be in there. And then we now have a stream of money recurring over $100 million every year for resilience efforts. And so you have certain areas in Florida, prone to having severe flooding. There's things in infrastructure you can do to mitigate that. And I think that this is something that is a long-term commitment from our state, and we're happy that we were able to get it done. We also understand that one of the jewels of our state is that we have 1,300 miles of coastline. That's one of the reasons why people want to come to Florida. That's why a lot of people want to live in Florida. This budget includes $100 million in beach nourishment funding to continue addressing Florida's critically eroded shorelines. And that's just from the state component. We also are dedicating an additional $50 million in federal funding for beach renourishment. It's going to be a total of $150 million, which I think will be really, really good. And of course, we're continuing with $10 million for the Resilient Coastline program within the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection within DEP. So this is something, these coastal resiliency grants will help protect Florida's coral reefs, which is obviously a first line of defense from storm surge. Also, they're a major tourism attraction. So we got a lot of stuff, a lot of hands on deck to be able to address a lot of these. We're also able to fully fund the Department of Transportation's work program. So these investments are $10.3 billion. The investment will provide for the retention and creation of more than 148,000 jobs. And if you look what we were able to do when COVID hit, when people were working remotely, you saw a big reduction in traffic. We sped up some of those projects. We were able to make some good progress on I-4 in the Tampa Bay area and some other parts around the state, which was good. as the revenue declined, there was a concern that we were not going to be able to do future projects on target. Now, with the fully funding of this, we're back on schedule, and hopefully we'll be able to even get ahead of schedule because of the significant investments that we've been able to do. So we're a growing state. We're proud of our infrastructure programs, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve. So our commitment to that is going to remain steadfast. We also address something that is very important, the seaports. You had these airlines, a lot of these industries got bailed out, but not our ports. And granted, some ports in Florida do very well with the traditional shipping. Other ports, like Port Canaveral here in Central Florida, much more dependent on cruise operations, which have been mothballed by the federal government for over a year. And so that's caused a big loss of revenue. So we're able to do $250 million from some of our federal relief funds to support our seaports so that they can return to pre-pandemic operational levels. And I think that that's going to be very, very important. Legislature's also given me almost $75 million for the Job Growth Grant Fund. So that's a fund that I can use, usually working with local governments to establish infrastructure improvements or job training projects. And I know we've done stuff in Central Florida. We did the airport in Brevard County a couple years ago. I vetoed the Job Growth Grant Fund in last year's budget simply because we didn't know what the revenue was going to be like. And I told everybody, there's stuff I'm vetoing. We vetoed $1 billion. There's stuff I'm vetoing. Some of this stuff is my stuff. So it's not necessarily me saying it's bad. It's just we're in uncharted territories. We got to make tough decisions. So we didn't have the Job Growth Grant Fund this past year. Starting July 1st, we'll have it again. It's a pretty significant amount of money, and we're going to be working hard to solicit requests from a lot of our communities throughout the state of Florida. So we are honored to be able to be here and sign this budget today. I think that there's a lot of great stuff going on in the state of Florida, and I think the budget really reflects a state government that is meeting the core concerns of Floridians. I didn't even mention we did $1,000 bonuses for all law enforcement and first responder. That's in this budget. So public safety, K-12 education, we still did all the stuff with our universities, which is important. We did the environment, natural resources, very, very important. And so infrastructure, roads, bridges, kind of the core stuff. And we're going to probably have $10 billion in reserve after we get the June numbers in. But clearly, we're going to have $9.5 billion in reserve, meeting the needs of Floridians, all with having the lowest per capita tax burden in the country. And so we're proud of that, and we're going to make it official here in 1 second. Oh, before I do that, I forgot to mention. So our vetoes were about $1.5 billion. However, most of what I vetoed last time was coming from general revenue, some of the trust fund money and all that, and we did $1 billion. The vetoes here are mostly, the lion's share of it is the federal money that was going to go to our new emergency response fund. And I called for the creation of that. The legislature did it. I think it's a great idea. The problem is, between the time I called for it and the legislature passed it and the present, the federal government issued guidance on how you could use the funds. And they basically did two things. One, made it clear that these are grants that would be subject to normal procurement. So in an emergency situation, you don't have the time to do normal procurement. You've got to do this very quickly. So it would defeat the purpose to try to use it for emergency response if you have to go through all that bureaucracy. But even more significantly is they said you can't use it for the purpose that we wanted to use it for, to create a fund to meet needs in the future. And so because of that, if we were to go forward with it, we were going to run into risk of having the feds come after us for it. We also functionally just wouldn't have been able to use it effectively because of having to go through the normal procurement and not being able to do in the emergency posture. So we had to veto that $1 billion. Now that money will then go and effectively be repurposed for all the other federal money that's been spent. We only got half of the money up front. And what the federal government did, they do whatever they can to hurt states like Florida and to help states that were locked down. So if you're a lockdown state with high unemployment, you got more money than your per capita basis. If we had lower unemployment, Florida got a lot less than our per capita allotment would be. Even more, they do 100% disbursement to the high unemployment states. They only disperse 50% of the funds right now to the free states and to the low unemployment states. So we have a situation in Florida where we're supposed to get, I think, $8.8 billion. We're only getting $4.4 billion off the top. By me vetoing this, that goes into basically the $4.4 billion. So I think we're going to end up being able to meet the needs because the legislature left a couple billion on the table they didn't even touch. But it's interesting how that works. So the federal funds, when we vetoed that, we're vetoing it because the subsequent guidance that came out made it clear to us that it was untenable to use the funds in those situations. I just want to make clear, though, I do think having an emergency response fund separate from general revenue is a good idea. I think if we're able to do that, you can then meet the emergency needs. You get reimbursed back into that fund from FEMA. You don't have to worry about the general revenue balance at that point. So we're going to work with the legislature, maybe see what we can do in this next upcoming legislative session. But for now, we're just not on solid footing, unfortunately. And we didn't really, the statute, it's not clear that this is a problem with that, but it's kind of the subsequent administrative guidance and what they would choose to fight over. So that's just that. But that's why, we have the $1.5 billion. The $1 billion is that emergency fund we tried to create, and it's just not allowable under the law. All right. Today is the 2nd, right? All right. You guys are going to get one of these pens, so be ready. Oh boy. Racking up this thing. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Here, pass those out.
Thank you very much.
All right. Budget.
Very good.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. I can take a couple questions before I leave. I just got briefed on it this morning. It's my understanding that's not a DJJ facility where they were at. So I just need to learn a little bit more about kind of what happened with that. Obviously, it's a really problematic situation to have that. And then to have, I think one of the kids said, I didn't want to kill the police officer. I just wanted to shoot at him. That's despicable. So we're going to look in to see what the issue is with that. Yes, sir. Look, I think, here's what I'd say. Nikki Fried has done nothing in office. She does nothing. All she does is emote on social media, virtue signal to small dollar donors in California and New York. She spent millions of dollars to put her face on every gas pump across this state purely to boost her own image at your expense as a taxpayer. She's a lockdown lobbyist. She would have had our kids locked out of school the whole year. She would have had this business shuttered for the whole year. They would be out of business if Fried were governor. So she's opposed us at every turn. All the good stuff we've been able to accomplish for Florida, she opposes it. And I've done more, I think, in my first week as governor than she just done in her entire time as agriculture commissioner. One more. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I think we're better than ahead of schedule where we thought. We're not. I mean, our unemployment rate before the pandemic was about 2.9%. So I think what you're going to see is we have more job openings than I think. I mean, you guys probably are looking for folks. I've never seen an issue wherever I go in any part of the state. I mean, as you guys know, I mean, we got a very diverse state. You know, if you're in Volusia County and then you go to Coral Gables or then you go to Pensacola, all these places, you know, all very rich, very, very unique places. Every single person will come up to me who has business saying, I need people, I want to hire, we need to hire more people. So I think what's going to happen is, you know, we do have the job search requirements back in. I think the incentives are going to be to get more folks back in the workforce. But as you have more people look, you may see the rate go up because some of the people who are kind of out aren't counted. But then I think you're going to see it go down. One of the things I'm concerned about, though, if you look at what's going on with the overall macro economy across the country, is inflation. And if you look at gas prices, I mean, these things are going through the roof compared to where they were a year and a half, 2 years ago. That is going to pinch a lot of folks. And so I hope that can be kept into check. Obviously, a state government, this is kind of more involved in federal policy at that point. But that's a big, big problem. And I think that, yes, there's a lot of good things going on in Florida. I think we have a path to, to put a lot more people back to work. But I also worry about some of those macro signals that we're seeing in the economy. And look, in the last, 15 months, this federal government has added more to the debt than we've ever seen since World War II in such a short period of time. And my view on that is just, look, there's got to be something's got to be done. There's going to be the bill's going to come due somehow, whether that's higher interest rates, higher inflation. You know, I'm not sure, but it is a concern. And I know when you look around to see the gas prices and everything, but I can tell you this: in Florida, you know, we have ruled out from the beginning any increase in the gas tax. So we're not going to do that to consumers because we know how much that hits them. So. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back very, very soon. And you can't ask for a better quality of life than New Smyrna Beach. I'll tell you what, it's great. And so, you know, as we were going through the summer and started to get some momentum, even obviously as you're dealing with COVID the whole time, we understood it was important to get our kids back in school. And so we made the decision, I think in June, that every parent in Florida would have the ability to send their kid to school in person when the school year started. And we didn't force the parents, because if parents wanted to do virtual, we figured, you know, it's fine. I mean, we were confident that it was the right thing to do from a safety perspective, and obviously critical from an academic perspective and a social development perspective. So we were able to do that. We were the only large state in the country to have 100% of the families with access to in-person education at the start of the school year. The only other states that had, only a handful of states that did, and most of them were much smaller population-wise than us. And so when we did the schools, there was a lot of naysayers. A lot of people, you know, were saying schools need to be closed. They were wrong, and we were right on that, and we're happy that we were right on that. And it's something that if we had gotten that one wrong, you can have a good economy, you can have all these things, but if you'd have gotten that wrong and locked the kids out of school for a year, that would have had lasting consequences for our communities and for our state. So we were happy to be able to do that. And so I think what happened was, we worked hard to get people back to work. You started to see the economy do better than expected in Florida, even as early as last summer. And then we really served as kind of a respite for other citizens of our country and other states that were chafing under these lockdowns. They would just try to get to Florida. Some move permanently, some just ride out the lockdown, some just come for effectively a proverbial breath of fresh air. And so that ended up helping a lot of our hospitality industry. It allowed us to get more people back to work. These restaurants, some of these restaurants now have never done better than they've ever done, in their history. We were just over in New Smyrna Beach. They said first quarter, the best in the history of the restaurant by far. And I hear that a lot of places that I go. But you remember a year ago, you had people like Fauci saying all these restaurants should be closed. And you know what I have when people come up to me? They say, thank God you didn't listen to Fauci, because we would be out of a job. So we ended up seeing that, and I know a lot of places. I was in the Panhandle recently. They never did better than they have in the last year in terms of the tourism and all these other things. Obviously, you see the property values in Florida. People want to buy homes here, and that's just, I think, as a result of doing it right. So when we came into this legislative session, I knew that we were going to be strong. I think these guys eventually came around to, but they had been given a lot of forecasts that said that it was going to be very bad. And so, I was just like, look, I have confidence. So we ended up going, and then as the session went on, they got the estimates in April, and it was clear that we were in really, really good shape. So that the budget we'll have today that I'll sign will likely have, once June is up and the fiscal year ends, we'll probably have about $10 billion in reserve. And that's just state money. It's not including any of this federal money. We're at 9.5 billion after May. But what's happened is when they did the estimates in April, we took in almost 800 million above estimate. So they're literally doing an estimate in real time, making an estimate for April, May, June, last 3 months of the fiscal year, and they undershot the April by 800 million. May, we think it's going to be at least 500 million that we will have got over what they estimated. And so if you get another half a billion in June, that's going to be $10 billion that we'll have in reserve. That puts us in an awfully strong position to weather any future storms. You would have told somebody that we'd have $10 billion in reserves last year. Nobody would have believed. I probably wouldn't have believed you, to be honest with you. And I was the one that was the most bullish. So I think it's a testament to the fact that Florida, has been free. People are free to make decisions and go about their lives. Obviously, these legislators over a number of years have produced budgets, and obviously I've signed a couple budgets. But if you look at Florida, we have. Like New York has millions of fewer people than we do. Their budget is over twice the size of Florida's budget because we're very prudent with how we spend money. Our infrastructure is better. Our K-12 performs better. We have the best state university system in the country for 4 years in a row by U.S. News and World Report. So you look at that and you look at the budget that we're signing today, we're doing more for education when a lot of people thought we were going to have to do less. We're doing more for water resources and environment and things that matter to both of our presiding officers very much, way more than anyone thought was possible. We're doing bonuses for all law enforcement, fire, and first responders, which nobody was, a lot of people said we wouldn't be able to get that done. So we've done all these things to meet all these key needs from the state, and yet we do that with the lowest per capita tax burden in the United States. So we're proud of what this budget will accomplish. I mentioned education. We've got almost $2 billion for early childhood education, almost $23 billion for K-12 system. We did do last year the biggest teacher compensation expansion in a generation, and we actually did that and more this year. So they've even added more, and our goal is to get the average minimum salary for teachers, and this is throughout the public, the school districts and the charter schools, to be $47,500. Only 12% of school districts in the whole country have average minimum even above $40,000. So we were the bottom half of states, states. Now we're going to be, in the top 10. Hopefully we'll be able to be in the top 4 or 5 when all the dust settles. So we're proud of that, but we're also proud of, because our schools were open. And when we were pushing to do this, you had oh my God, media was so against the schools. The media wanted to lock the kids out of school the whole year. I mean, let's just be honest. They tried to scare parents over and over again. You had some of these bureaucrats, particularly in D.C., that were fear-mongering, and the data was in. Last June, the data was in. We knew that it was the right thing to do. So we pushed forward. There was a lot of people that were opposed to that. I'll tell you, these superintendents they wanted to get back. Most of the teachers wanted to get back. I know the teachers union sued us to close the schools, but at the end of the day, most of the teachers did want to go back because they understood what a year of virtual would have been like for the students. And so because principals had to work extra hard, the teachers had to work hard, we were able to do $1,000 bonuses for all principals and all K through 12 teachers throughout the state of Florida for public and for charter. So that's a pretty big deal to be able to get that accomplished. We also understand that the issue of mental health has been a perennial issue. It's an issue that's very difficult to tackle in some respects. It's an issue that our First Lady, my great wife, has done a lot of good things for the state on. But we also understood when the pandemic hit, this was throwing a lot of things up in the air, and this has exacerbated problems. But I will tell you this, whatever mental health challenges we have in Florida, they would have been way worse had we not had things open. I can tell you that right now, because you look at these other states that continue to do lockdown, continue to keep people out of school and out of work, and those problems are going to mount dramatically. So here in Florida, we understand for our school children it's important. We have $120 million for in-school mental health initiatives, so that's a $20 million increase over last year. And we also have $5.5 million for youth mental awareness and assistance, which the First Lady has been involved with specifically, and we really appreciate that. But then there's another $137.6 million for community-based services for adults and children with mental wellness needs. So all told, you look at all the different agencies that we fund and all the different programs, we got about $2.5 billion for mental health and substance abuse throughout the state of Florida. So we understand it's a challenge, but we're stepping up to meet the challenge. We also gotten a lot of momentum on supporting our water infrastructure and improving our water resources, which is very important for a state that's built around fishing and boating and enjoying the outdoors. And we made a lot of progress my first 2 years as governor. A lot of people thought, given the circumstances, that this was going to get whacked and our momentum was going to get derailed. But actually, if you look, there's actually more money for things like Everglades and water resources and water quality than even I asked for in the budget. I think they did even more things, and I know both Senator Simpson and Speaker Sprowls were instrumental in that. So this is going to put us on track. We're going to be able to complete some of these major reservoirs and stormwater treatment areas just within the next couple years that are going to have such an important impact on kind of the plumbing, the natural plumbing of the state of Florida. We also have the first time, I think, certainly in Florida history, I don't know many other states that have done this, we started a program, Resilient Florida, to be able to address the needs that we face as a storm-prone state, as a state that has to deal with a lot of flooding. So we started with $500 million of seed money, and then through the Speaker and Wilton working together, there's going to be a recurring pot of over $100 million that comes in every year. And so these will be local communities can apply for these grants, and you could be able to do things. So we have some areas, they flood all the time. If you had some infrastructure there, you'd be able to potentially mitigate that. And there's a whole host of things that go into that. We're also proud of the amount of money that's been put in for beach renourishment. I mean, it's a very important thing. So we're going to have $150 million for beach renourishment, which is important when you have 1,300 miles of coastline that we're being good stewards of that. One of the things we did when the pandemic pushed a lot of people into remote work, we saw the traffic declined in most parts of Florida. So we accelerated some of these road projects in highly congested areas like in I-4 in Orlando, did one in Tampa, some other places. But then what happened was, because they were projecting less revenue, our DOT had to basically delay or plan to delay some of these projects into the future because they didn't know how much money. Well, with the budget today, the work program for the Florida Department of Transportation is fully funded. So we're going to be able to get all these projects on track, and actually, we may even be able to accelerate some. I think we have the resources, the money to pay to accelerate it. I think it's just there's a high demand for these services that I think that'll be probably the one impediment that we end up doing. But this is going to be a fully funded work program, which we're really supportive of. And I did mention the bonuses for police, fire, first responders, $1,000 each across the board. That's like 175,000 individuals across the state of Florida. And we understood when COVID hit, there's folks in white-collar jobs could work from home, remote, and God bless you if you did. The people in uniform have to show up every day. They can't keep the streets safe on Zoom. You can't put out a fire on Zoom. They just got to be there. And so they were there from the very beginning, day in, day out. And then particularly with our police, they've been treated horribly throughout this country in some of these communities. And what we said here is we're standing by law enforcement. We're standing by law enforcement. We have your back, and we understand the importance that supporting law enforcement plays in maintaining public safety in those areas that have moved to defund police or just haven't supported their law enforcement. You're seeing crime increase dramatically in some of these places throughout the United States of America. We don't want that in Florida, so we appreciate the service. But so I think because of all those factors, we thought it was important to seek bonuses for all of our first responders, including police. So we're able to get that in the budget here, $1,000 for every sworn law enforcement, firefighter, and EMT in the state of Florida. So that's going to be a really big deal. So I think that what this budget shows is that we spend money prudently, but I think we spend it effectively. And I think we're focusing on areas that will really make a difference. Obviously, rewarding some of the folks who've been instrumental in the last year to keep Florida moving forward. Of course, maintaining such a low tax burden, which we're going to continue to do, and then having a lot of money left over in reserves, in case something happens down the pike. And I think we are in, even though there's a lot of good signs in Florida, if you look nationally, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. You see inflation. Look at gas. Gas has gone up tremendously. A lot of the materials that people need to do business have gone up. So you have inflationary pressures. You're just going to have a lot of things. And we just have to be ready. And these are things that are far beyond the control of a state government, of course, but they're things that we're going to have to contend with. And so I think we have an adequate cushion to be able to deal with this. Final thing I'll say before I turn it over to the speaker and the president, we did about $1.5 billion in vetoes out of the budget. Most of that was back of the bill, and the largest chunk of that was something that I actually requested, was $1 billion to create an emergency response fund. And the idea was if we have emergencies and you need to pay for response, you don't have to use general revenue. You have a fund, you pay, you get your federal reimbursements back into that fund, and it basically just runs off budget. The legislature agreed, we set it up. The problem is after they did that, the federal government came with kind of rules and guidance about how the money could be spent that we got from the feds. We were going to use federal dollars for this. And they said basically you can't, it's a grant, so you got to do normal procurement. Well, in an emergency situation, you don't do normal procurement. You got to get the money out the door. So it would be totally ineffective to use it for emergency. But then they said that it doesn't apply for a situation like that anyway. So we'd end up assuming a lot of risk and having to battle with the feds. So I think it's a good idea. I'm glad they did it. I would like to do it in the future, but I couldn't in good conscience put that money in there knowing that it was not going to be able to be used for that. And if we did, it was going to be clawed back by the federal government. So that was kind of the major thing. But I think the rest, by and large, we did $1 billion in vetoes last time. But those billion, a lot of that was general revenue vetoes. We did do some trust fund vetoes. So I think this time, because the budget's in good shape, we were able to do, so these guys got more of some of their initiatives. And quite frankly, there were things I vetoed last time that I supported. Heck, I vetoed my own stuff in some respects because we just didn't know, and we had to make tough decisions so that Florida was prepared to handle whatever came down the pike with COVID-19. And I think we were able to do that effectively. So that's the picture with those vetoes. But I think all things considered, you look at a lot of the major issues that we're dealing with, and I think the legislature did a really good job to address, almost all the key issues. And so I thank them for that, and we'll turn it over to President Simpson.
And we really appreciate the governor being in Separate Hills today. And we are in Senator Burgess's district. I have to remind myself of that now because it's like this is my district, but it's really not. It's really Senator Burgess's district.
We'll take it.
Yes, and for one more year. And then our budget chair in the Senate was Kelly Stargell, and she did a wonderful job this year putting the budget together. As everyone here knows, it's a $101 billion budget. The speaker's team and representatives worked very well with us, not only in this area, but structurally. What I was proud of for the state of Florida, the $9+ billion of reserves is not by accident. It was planned. We have a AAA bond rating in the state of Florida by all three agencies. We did structural one-time big needs with a lot of the stimulus dollars that came down to Florida. We have $2 billion additional in transportation. We put $300 million into the wildlife corridors. So if that's important to you, an additional $100 million into Florida Forever. And so we structurally did things with sea level rise. That was a major priority of the speakers. We started that program here in the state of Florida, the first of its kind, $500 million initially with a recurring funding of $100 million a year, a little over $100 million. Same thing with septic to sewer systems. City of Separate Hills, if you've got any of those systems shovel ready, I would be calling DEP right away to get in on some of that $500 million because it's available. That's what it's there for. So we wanted to put enough resources out there to make a large impact in the initial projects that are shovel ready, and then have a recurring stream that would continue afterwards, a little over $100 million in that fund also. All along, affordable housing, that gets a big story every year. And every year, there's a Sadowski fund that the legislature, we would generally sweep a lot of those funds. But we're still spending $500-600 million a year in affordable housing. This year with the budget we did, there's an additional $70 million a year going to affordable housing of state funds through that trust fund. So the last 10 years, we've averaged about $140 million a year going to affordable housing. Now it's going to be a little over $200 million a year. In addition to that, and I'll be brief and turn to the speaker, but we did $1 billion a year tax cut. So one of the things that we don't talk about this year is we did the Wayfair bill. So if you were an out-of-state company not charging sales tax to in-state needs, we were not collecting that tax. So every small business that's represented in this room, and I know there's a lot of them, was at a disadvantage to your out-of-state competitors. We fixed that loophole. And then we took the money and we did two things with it. We said, first of all, we're going to backfill the unemployment compensation fund, $4 billion. So that's the first 4 years. And then we're going to take that money and do $1 billion a year tax cut on businesses for the rent tax. So in here, 4 years from now, if you're paying a lease or rent to anyone, you're essentially going to go to zero from wherever you are today. So go back and look at that amount of money every month, and you'll see those tax cuts that are coming after the unemployment compensation fund gets full. And the reason we did the unemployment compensation funds, every small business in the state would have been impacted by it. Today, the way your state set this budget up, there will be no impact. And 4 years from now, you get a big tax cut as we do that. So we thought it was very important to stimulate small business. We thought the projects that we did were very stimulative to blue collar workers. People that have to go to work every day. During the pandemic, and the governor mentioned teachers, law enforcement, and paramedics. There wasn't a truck driver that wasn't working, and there wasn't a farmer that wasn't working every day. And every day you went to Publix or Walmart or wherever you shop, there was groceries there and food there because of the hard, working men and women of this area, and not only this area, but across the entire state. And so we're very proud of that. We're very proud of this budget. Thank you, Governor. I was going to call him Vito Corleone after the remark he made earlier. I mean, how many governors, and it's $1 billion each year, right? But certainly last year, the $1 billion came under a lot of stress with the pandemic coming on, and we had no idea what the budget was going to look like this year coming into it. And so each month it got much better, and a lot of that credit goes to our governor for making sure we were opened up. We were opened up very quickly. We got kids back in schools. We went to work, saved a lot of small businesses, and we're very proud to have supported the governor in those efforts. And we appreciate the light touch this year, Vito, on the budget. So thank you, Governor.
Well, it's great to be here with President Simpson, Senator Burgess, members of the Pasco delegation. We've got Representative Randy Maggard, who's part of this delegation, Representative Mariano, Representative Artie and Zika, who are here as House members. What a great budget year for us. Coming into this, the governor and the president mentioned this, but here we are, rewind about a year ago, and we're thinking about the next legislative session, thinking that it is going to be financial Armageddon. And much to the folks' credit behind me, including the governor and the Senate president, we all got together and say, veto it all, Governor, as much as you can, because we don't know what the future is going to bring, and we have to prepare for the next session. But what happened was real leadership. The budget that's going to be signed today isn't just be organic growth, right? It was purposeful. You look across the country in places that have Gavin Newsom as their governor or Andrew Cuomo as their governor, and they're not having days like today in city councils just like this one with hardworking people around shaking their head because they know the difference between having their business open and having their business closed. They know the difference between being able to have their child in a classroom where they're engaging with students and engaging with their teacher and coming home and excited about learning and not being able to go to school at all. And the reason that we're here today, the reason that we have the things that we have in this budget, which I'm going to talk about briefly, is because of this governor, because of the leaders behind me who said, we don't care what CNN is saying, we don't care what the national pundits are saying, we don't care what federal bureaucrats are saying, our kids are going to school and our people are going back to their jobs. But I think it did provide us a unique opportunity as a legislature. We got to take a step back during the pandemic and say, so often we're in the hustle and bustle of life and we think about, what do we need today? Not what are we going to need tomorrow and 20 years from now? And what does our state look like in 30 years? And we talked about how we wanted to prepare Florida today for the challenges of tomorrow. And that's what this budget was really about. And I praise the leadership of the Senate President, Senator Stargell, Chairman Trumbull in the House, on what we did. Think about it. K-12 education. What's more important than our children? In addition to the governor making sure that children are back in the classroom, we increased the budget spend over $315 million for K-12 education this budget year because we want our kids back in the classroom. We want to make up any learning gains that they may have missed. We talked about Schools of Hope is in this budget, which allows children in Pasco, Pinellas, Polk County, Hillsborough County, who are in perpetual failing schools to be able to have access to an amazing choice option to get their kids on a pathway to prosperity. We talked about jobs. Nothing's more important than our families being able to go get a job, to find purposeful work that not only give them a sense of purpose, but provides for their family. We had some challenges during the pandemic. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in making sure not only do we have the technology we need when it comes to workforce, but that people in our community in Pasco County and Pinellas and throughout the state who are looking for a job, that there's real help for people to let them know what credentials they need, how they can get a job, what pays the best, and what's going to be the thing that's going to fulfill them. That's in this budget. We thought about our most vulnerable population. Those of us who got to get up every day during the pandemic and go to work, got to see our coworkers, but there were a lot of people who couldn't do any of that. Our elderly population, our disabled population. There's tens of millions of dollars in this budget to take people off the disability waiting list, to provide for people with Alzheimer's respite care. And for the first time since 1976, this legislature took the lead to cover postpartum moms after they give birth to make sure that they're healthy and extended that coverage from 2 months to 12 months. And the last thing I'll mention is, we talk about people are going to be flocking. I think, if you wake up and you're in Michigan tomorrow, chances are you're not going to Chicago for vacation. You're coming here to the state of Florida. You're going to come to Pasco County. You're going to come to Clearwater. You're going to come to Tarpon Springs where Congressman Bill Rackus and I live, and you're going to enjoy the sunshine. Nothing is more important to our future than our environment. And it seems like a decent place like Zephyr Hills to talk about clean water. You're here. There you go. But this governor, this Senate president, there has never been a legislature that has championed Florida's environment more than this one. The president and the governor talked about how we partnered on resiliency and septic to sewer. What could be better than preparing for the future to make sure that our communities don't flood, that it doesn't ruin our homes and our businesses, that it keeps our homeowners insurance low, and that communities like Zephyr Hills have the ability to upgrade their sewer infrastructure to make sure that is up to date, that it's not hurting our water quality. We want to make sure that, in addition to being on a farm in Trilby, that you can go to a beach in Clearwater. which you're going to be able to do because under this budget, we have historic funding for beach renourishment. We want your families to be outside. The governor in a Home Depot just a couple of weeks ago signed Freedom Week, our tax package, to encourage Floridians to go outside. There's more money in this budget to fund our state parks and to encourage our families to be outside than ever before. We couldn't be more proud of this budget because it prepares the Florida today for the challenges of tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Governor, and members of the legislature who made this happen.
And I'm going to sign in just a second, but I also was remiss for not thanking them. They did the budget on time. It was on the Friday afternoon. They did it. They got out of town, didn't have to extend, and so that isn't always the case. So great job there, and we'll go ahead and do the John Hancock. Okay, for you. For you. All right. Well, between you two, okay, thank you. All right, thank you. They did well here. Definitely this part of Florida had a big part to do with all these guys in these key positions. So we appreciate it. We appreciate the hard work. We're excited about some of the opportunities that lies ahead. I think this provides a good blueprint for us to be able to meet a lot of challenges to our state. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people that I think over the last year and a half have said, "Thank God I live in Florida." So. Okay, questions? Anybody got a question? Yes, sir.
About funding for coastal communities dealing with flooding issues, but I want to ask you about two potential line items that you're talking about. One of them was $750,000 for the Gulf for linear coastal park, and that would have provided funding for increasing their boardwalk, coastal restoration, basically dealing with some flooding issues that they're having downtown. So I want to ask you about why that line item. And then the other one is $400,000 for Feeding America Tampa Bay, which has clearly had a very difficult year, feeding a lot of other people.
Well, we did a huge amount of money, if you look in the budget, for different types of nutrition. And there's also federal money that people are able to access locally for a lot of those issues. And so I think we tried to say if there was something that they could do federally to meet a need, then we would want to do that. If there were other aspects that we were funding that didn't require a line, and clearly that type of boardwalk, there's hundreds of millions of dollars now, that's available for that. Yes, sir.
When do you think the first responders may receive their $7,000?
I hope so. So basically, the budget's now signed. Now, we had the agencies working to get this moving, but it's going to take, it's not something we just turn around immediately, so they're going to be working on it, and I think we're pretty confident we can get the teachers by the end of the summer, and I'm hoping to get the first responders. The difference is the teachers, there's already a database of the teachers, so we know who they are, all the school districts, all the charter school teachers, and we could just do it. With the first responders, some of these EMTs, so you're going to have to get all that information. So they are working on doing that, but obviously we want to get it out as soon as possible. But I think on that, it's more of an issue of making sure we're getting everybody that was promised 175,000. So to make sure we get all those folks there and that we're doing it. And we do have some money. We did more money than just that for the administration and in case there was more people that needed to be paid. So, but those are two priorities because those folks, I think, are looking forward to it. It's something that we fought for. So hopefully we'll be able to get something to them, as soon as possible.
Governor, why is Upper opening? Anything you think of Bay that you're excited about?
Got this guy right here. Got this guy. But we, really, the region here should feel very proud. I mean, if you look just the greater Tampa Bay region, you have the presiding officers, you have appropriations in the Senate. Trumbull's from the Panhandle. We'll give them a pass on that. But I mean, I'm grew up in this region too. So I mean, it is interesting just to see that so many folks, from these counties, Pinellas, Pasco, Polk, are really leading and doing a lot of great stuff. We've done a lot of stuff with Chris recently in Pinellas County. We did the Resilient Florida bill signing in Tarpon Springs in his district, and I know we've done some other stuff with education. So we said, look, we want to come, and we asked Senator Simpson where would make sense, and he thought there'd be no better place than Zephyr Hills. And so even though it may not be technically in his district, obviously, Pasco has done so well with all this. I'm looking at these things that we're approving. It's fine. And I'm looking through these things, and I'm just thinking to myself, they're going to build a statue after this guy because they're going to have a lot of stuff. So, but no, we're really proud of that. We're proud of the friends that we have. Me personally, proud of all the friends we have in Pasco County because you got a lot of great people here, and you did very well in this budget. So you guys should be happy. Thanks, everybody.
I just wanted to take a moment here at the end to clarify some things that were said over the last hour or so. If you're not from Florida here, where the governor has been speaking during most of these lives have been places that are what you would refer to as blue Florida, meaning when you looked on the maps during the election cycles, major cities. Volusia County, Daytona Beach, that's blue. He's talking about Zephyr Hills, that's Tampa Bay, St. Pete, that's blue. And these people support him unanimously in what you would refer to as quote-unquote blue Florida. Now, there's something else I wanted to show you guys that I think is important. You see this guy here on the right? This is Senate President Wilton Simpson. He's there wearing boots and blue jeans. Boots and blue jeans. Now, everyone else, of course, is somewhat, I guess you could call it business casual for some, but some guys are wearing suits. This is the part of Florida that a lot of people don't get. We, and I guess to some extent, rightfully so, get kind of a label that there is a certain thing people expect when they think of Florida. Zephyr Hills, I'll see if I can find it here. It's not my side of the state, but it's over, generally speaking, it's over here somewhere. Tampa, St. Pete area. This is the kind of reception and appreciation that our governor gets in what you would call Democrat blue Florida. I honestly, and I don't want to, here it is. Zephyr Hills. It's kind of inland, northeast a little bit. The Panhandle. And there are places that, I'm sure probably would be less receptive. But when you go back to that 60-minute piece where they tried to do the hit job on Governor DeSantis, it was the Democrat governor of West Palm Beach, Florida, that came to his defense and called out 60 Minutes. It's something a lot of people can't really wrap their mind around because they think of, all blue is over there and all red is over here. We have conservatives that are in charge of our state, and they have been. Now, some of those conservatives have been Democrats, and some of those conservatives have been Republicans. They're mostly all Republicans now because you can't really be a conservative and be part of the Democrat Party anymore. But one thing that pervades all Floridians is freedom to the extent that you get Florida man. Nobody here advocates for putting leashes on anyone. And that means you have enough leash down here to really screw up your life and do really dumb things. And that's where that meme comes from. So anyone trying to advocate for what's being put out of Washington, D.C. now with lockdowns and restricting freedom and forcing this, that, and the other, and redacting speech and censoring speech online, all this kind of stuff, that's literally the antithesis of Florida and our values and what we believe, to the extent that some people have said it's almost too free in Florida. So I just wanted to cover that. We have a huge, massive surplus in our budget. I mean, we have tons and tons of extra money because of the decisions that were made. And some people were asking about gasoline and food shortages. We have deals set up with Mexico. Almost all of our gasoline comes right through the Gulf and right into, in fact, I think the vast majority of it, if I zoom in here, comes into the port right by where they just had that issue with that phosphogypsum stack. This is the closest port in North America to the Panama Canal, right here. And we have some of the country's biggest ports here: Port Miami, Port Canaveral, and the big port up in Jacksonville as well. There's another huge port over here on the Panhandle. So in essence, when Florida breaks away like this in governance, we could operate, and we do de facto operate, as an independent Caribbean nation state. And as the dollar gets weaker and weaker and weaker, foreign investors and people coming from all over the world wanting to come to Florida are more likely to. Why? Because their foreign currency is now, comparatively speaking, more powerful versus the dollar. The lower the dollar goes, the more foreign currencies have power to get goods and services in the United States. It's kind of a weird antithetical thing. Strong dollar is bad for exporters and tourism, because they have to bring their weaker currency here and then convert it to dollars. It doesn't go as far. But as the dollar weakens, that's actually good for Floridians. Why? More tourism, more money from all over the world comes in. They spend it here. They stimulate our economy. We have more jobs. We have more competition for jobs. Wages go up. It's just better for the velocity of the money. And that's basically what economic activity is. We're going to have inflation in Florida, but we're going to be able to deal with it. Other places in the country don't have this luxury or this benefit. So anyway, 68 minute live. That's about as long as you can probably get away with. But anyway, I just wanted to cover a little bit what the governor was really saying when he was talking about our budget being in order, our fiscal house being in order, good stewardship, and why it matters. The lowest per capita tax burden of any state in the union is in Florida. Why? Because we have an external source of 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365 day a year income that comes from literally everywhere else in the globe. The other 49 states and every other country comes here. Just because, why? Well, we have bikinis, and we have beaches, and we have Disney, and we have all sorts of other wonderful things to come see and come do. And that's just the reality of it. So, but when it comes down to it, the people of the state of Florida, when your Senate president shows up for a budget signing in boots and a pair of blue jeans, you got some good folks. So anyway, I will leave it there. God bless. Have a great week. We will see you, of course, all tonight on Twitch at about 10:30. Anyone having questions can come there and ask away. So God bless. See you tonight.